The morning sun stretched gently across the open fields, casting long golden streaks through the grass as a quiet breeze whispered secrets only nature could understand. Emily, 12 years old and endlessly curious, wandered just beyond her grandparents' orchard. Her rain boots squished softly in the dew-covered grass as she chased shadows of butterflies that danced in the warm light. It was the kind of peaceful morning where even time seemed to slow down, letting the world breathe a little softer. She loved this time of day, when the world was still sleepy and her thoughts felt louder than the birds. Her grandparents' countryside farm was her favorite place in the world. Every summer she stayed here, and every summer she found a new corner of the land to explore. Today, she wandered farther than usual, letting instinct guide her through the tall grass and over uneven patches of earth. As she approached a crooked wooden fence, half swallowed by brambles, she noticed something unusual lying in the grass. At first, it looked like a pile of dirty rags, brown, curled up, unmoving. But then something about the shape stopped her in her tracks. Her heart skipped. It was too perfectly still. She stepped closer. A small gasp escaped her lips. It wasn't rags. It was a puppy. Emily froze just a few feet away. The little dog was curled tightly into itself, motionless. Its fur was matted with dirt and leaves, and its ribs looked faintly visible beneath the thin layer of fur. No sound, no breath, no movement. The world seemed to hold its breath with her. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she lowered herself to the ground. "Hey there," she whispered, as if speaking too loudly would shatter whatever fragile balance still existed. Her fingers hovered in the air before finally touching the small body. It was cold. Still, her throat tightened. She gently slid her hands underneath the puppy and lifted it into her lap. It didn't respond. Its head lolled slightly. Emily's eyes welled up with confusion and something else, something heavier. She wasn't sure what to do, but she knew she couldn't leave it here. Whatever had happened, it didn't deserve to end alone. Cradling the lifeless puppy in her arms, she looked around the empty field. The breeze had stopped. The butterflies had disappeared. All that remained was the girl, the silence, and a question that clung to her heart like morning mist. Am I already too late? Emily held the small puppy in her arms, her hands uncertain but full of care. Its body felt heavier than it should have, as though it carried more than just its tiny weight, like the weight of something slipping away. The soft fur against her skin was cool, not the kind of cool that comes from a brisk morning, but the kind that made her chest tighten. She looked down, studying its fragile face. The eyes were shut, lashes short and delicate. Its nose, dry and crusted with dirt, didn't twitch. The little chest showed no sign of movement. No rise, no fall, not even a flinch. A wave of panic began to rise in her throat. She leaned her face closer, barely breathing. "Come on," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." With trembling fingers, she pressed a hand lightly against its chest, feeling for any beat, any tiny pulse. Nothing. The silence around her deepened, like the earth had quieted just to echo her fear. The only sounds were the distant rustle of the trees and the occasional chirp of a bird, sounds that felt far too cheerful for what she was holding in her arms. Memories rushed in, flashes of movies she had watched where people performed miracles, where someone pressed on a chest and breath came back like magic. But this wasn't a movie. This was real, and the puppy didn't move. She wiped a tear from her cheek with the sleeve of her jacket. Her grandparents weren't close enough to call for. There was no phone, no adults nearby. Just her, this field, and the puppy that might already be gone. Still, she couldn't let go. "Not yet," she said under her breath. Emily looked around, as if the tall grass or scattered clouds might offer a solution. She remembered something her grandfather once told her when their old barn cat had gotten sick. Sometimes, when they're cold and small, they just need warmth and time. Don't count them out too fast. She took a shaky breath and pulled the edges of her jacket tighter around the puppy. With one hand, she gently rubbed its back, her palm moving in small circles. She didn't know if it would help. She didn't even know what she was doing, but she had to try. As she sat there, Holding the motionless puppy, the weight of the stillness pressed down on her. It felt like the world had paused in sympathy. And yet, something deep inside her still whispered, "Don't give up just yet." Emily didn't move from the patch of grass where she sat, the puppy still wrapped snugly in her jacket. Her arms curled protectively around him, as if shielding him from the world could somehow bring him back. The longer she sat there, the more she realized she couldn't accept the stillness. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Her breathing grew uneven. "You're not allowed to go like this," she whispered. "Not when I just found you." The breeze returned, soft and uncertain, rustling the grass around her like a sigh. Her heart beat faster now, not from fear, but from something stronger. Determination. She wasn't going to just sit there and watch. She had to do something. Anything. Emily shifted the puppy gently so its head rested on her lap. She placed 2 fingers near its tiny chest again, then moved them slightly to the side. Still no pulse, still no breath. But she refused to stop. She began to rub its sides more firmly, her hands small, but full of energy. She didn't know exactly what she was doing, but she'd seen people in movies do chest compressions on animals. She mimicked it, applying light but steady pressure with her thumbs. "Come on, little guy," she said, voice cracking. "Please, come back." She continued rubbing its sides, stroking from shoulders to tail, trying to push warmth back into its small frame. Her own jacket was thin, barely enough to hold in body heat, but she tucked it tightly around him and brought her face close again. "Breathe," she whispered. "Just one breath." The seconds dragged. Her eyes stung with tears. She had never felt so helpless and yet so focused. She wasn't going to stop, not until she was sure there was nothing more she could do. Minutes passed like hours. Then she thought she felt something, just the faintest twitch under her palm. She paused, staring down at him, hardly breathing herself. Nothing. Had she imagined it? She waited. Then suddenly, the tiniest sound broke the stillness, a barely audible gasp. Her heart jumped. The puppy's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Then again, a little faster. And then, a sound that made her gasp in return. A soft, broken whimper, weak but real. Emily let out a choked laugh, covering her mouth with one hand. "You're here," she whispered, cradling him closer. "You're really here." That moment, small, fragile, almost invisible, was enough to make the whole world shift. The lifeless puppy wasn't lifeless anymore. He had chosen to stay. Emily froze, her breath caught halfway in her throat. The puppy had made a sound. It wasn't loud or strong, but it had happened. A real, undeniable whimper had come from the tiny body in her arms. Her heart surged with something wild and overwhelming. Relief, disbelief, and a burst of hope so sudden it nearly knocked the air from her lungs. The puppy twitched again, this time a slight kick of one back leg. It was weak and uncoordinated, but it moved. Emily stared down, eyes wide and full of tears, afraid to even blink in case it all vanished. "You're alive," she whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. "You're really alive." And then it happened. A small, raspy cry. It pierced the silence like a spark in the dark. Not a bark, not a whine. Just a high-pitched, broken cry that echoed off the stillness of the field. The sound shattered everything. The fear, the doubt, the heavy silence that had wrapped itself around her for the last half hour. Emily burst into tears. This time, they weren't from fear. They were tears of joy, of absolute relief. The kind that made her chest shake and her shoulders slump. She let herself cry freely, one hand pressed to the puppy's fragile side, feeling its shallow but growing breaths. The puppy stirred again, shifting slightly under the jacket. Its front paw lifted an inch, then flopped down. Its eyes remained closed, but Emily didn't need to see them open yet. That sound, that single cry, was enough. It was a promise. He was fighting. Her instincts kicked in again. She adjusted the jacket, tucking it snugly around his little body to keep the warmth in. She gently lifted him a bit higher so she could support his head and shoulders better. He was still cold, still too weak, but something had changed. He had come back. "You're a fighter," she said softly, smiling through her tears. just like I hoped you'd be." The field, once so quiet and still, now felt different. The grass rustled a little louder. Birds called from nearby trees again, as if the world had started turning once more. The weight that had hung in the air had lifted. Emily sat there for another moment, unable to move, afraid to disturb the delicate thread of life that had just returned to her arms. But she knew one thing for certain. It was time to get help. Emily didn't hesitate. The moment the puppy let out that second fragile cry, she stood up, clutching him tightly against her chest. He was alive, but barely, and every second felt like it mattered more than the last. She turned toward the farmhouse, which sat at the edge of the field, its red roof barely visible beyond the trees. She ran. Her boots pounded against the ground, splashing through puddles and bending the tall grass in her path. The puppy was wrapped tightly in her jacket, his small body cradled carefully against her. She spoke to him as she ran, her voice breathless but steady. "Hold on, okay. We're almost there. Just a little longer." She didn't know if he could hear her, but she kept talking anyway. It made her feel less afraid. The farmhouse came into view, and she shouted before her feet even hit the gravel path. "Grandpa, Grandma, I need help." Her voice cracked with urgency, breaking the still air like a fire alarm. The back door creaked open within seconds. Her grandfather, tall and weathered, stepped onto the porch with a look of confusion that turned to alarm as soon as he saw her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, rushing down the steps. Emily didn't stop moving. "It's a puppy," she gasped. "He wasn't breathing, but now he is. He needs help, please." Without a word, her grandfather took charge. He ushered her inside and cleared the kitchen table. "Lay him down here." Gently. Her grandmother appeared behind them, already pulling a towel from the linen drawer. The house, which had been so calm and quiet that morning, now buzzed with focused energy. The old man grabbed a small heating pad from a drawer, plugging it in and setting it on low. Emily watched as he wrapped the towel around it, then carefully placed the puppy on top. Her grandmother brought over a shallow bowl of warm water and a small dropper. "He's cold," her grandfather said, his voice calm but serious. "We need to warm him up slowly. Emily, talk to him. Keep him calm." Emily knelt beside the table, her face just inches from the tiny dog. "You're doing great," she whispered, reaching out to gently stroke his head. "We've got you now." The puppy gave another weak whimper, barely audible. Her grandmother carefully dripped a bit of sugar water into his mouth. "If he's got a spark left," she said softly, "this might help him keep it." Emily stayed close, her hand resting on the towel, her eyes locked on the puppy's slow, steady breaths. She had reached him in time, but the night ahead would test them all. The sun slit below the hills, casting long shadows across the farmhouse as the day gave way to evening. Inside, the kitchen had turned into a quiet sanctuary. The warm glow of a lamp filled the room, and in the center of the table, the puppy lay bundled in layers of towels, resting atop the gently humming heating pad. Emily hadn't moved far. She sat in a chair pulled close to the table, her elbows propped up, her chin resting on her hands. Her eyes were heavy, but she refused to close them. Every few minutes, she'd reach out and touch the puppy's side, just to feel it rise and fall. The breaths were slow and shallow, but steady. For now, that was enough. Her grandparents had checked in more than once. Her grandfather had adjusted the heating pad and muttered quiet reassurances, while her grandmother had brought tea and a sandwich that sat untouched on a plate beside her. "Get some sleep, sweetheart," her grandmother had said gently. "I can't," Emily whispered. "He needs someone to stay." So, they let her be. Outside, the night deepened. Crickets chirped in the dark, and the wind brushed softly against the windows. But inside, time moved differently. Every second was measured by the soft breath of the puppy and the flicker of hope in Emily's heart. She had already named him. She hadn't told anyone yet, but in her mind, he was lucky. Not because he had survived, though that was part of it, but because she had found him in time, and now they had this moment, this strange, quiet miracle. Emily reached out again, gently running her finger down his back. His fur was still rough in places, but warmer now. Less fragile. His eyes had fluttered open once, just briefly, before slipping shut again. That single glance had given her enough strength to keep going. She leaned closer. "You're doing so good," she whispered. "You're stronger than you look, you know." The puppy gave a soft sigh, barely more than a breath. Emily smiled and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. It was a long night. The minutes blurred. The clock ticked endlessly, but she never left his side. She stayed through the yawns in the cold floor and the ache in her back. She stayed because something deep inside her knew that he would do the same for her, if he could. And somehow, through the silence, that promise passed between them. The first rays of dawn crept gently through the lace curtains, casting pale golden patterns across the kitchen floor. Emily's head was resting on her folded arms beside the tall wrapped bundle, her breathing soft and even. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, but sometime in the quiet hours, exhaustion had won. A faint sound stirred her. A rustle. She blinked, groggy at first, unsure whether she had imagined it. Her eyes flicked to the table. The towel had shifted. The puppy, Lucky, was no longer completely still. His head twitched, then slowly lifted an inch off the padding before dropping back down. Emily straightened in her chair, heart suddenly pounding. "Lucky," she whispered. He moved again, a tiny stretch of his front legs, awkward and weak but full of effort. A soft squeak escaped his mouth, not quite a bark, not quite a whine, but louder than anything she heard from him so far. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy but focused. He blinked once, then twice, and looked in her direction. Emily let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside her for hours. Her smile broke across her face like sunshine after a storm. "You're awake," she breathed. "You really made it." She reached out, her hand shaking slightly, and gently stroked his head. His ears twitched. He leaned into her touch, just barely, like he recognized her, like he knew she was the one who had stayed. The kitchen door creaked behind her. Her grandfather stepped in, his flannel shirt wrinkled, his boots already on. He stopped when he saw her. Emily turned to him with shining eyes. "Grandpa, look, he's awake." The old man stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he observed the scene. Then slowly he nodded. "Well, I'll be," he said softly. "He's a tough little thing." Her grandmother followed a moment later, carrying a small bowl of soft, warm oatmeal for Emily. She paused, smiled, and set it aside. "You gave him a reason to keep fighting." Emily scooped Lucky gently into her arms. He didn't resist. His tiny tail moved once, barely more than a wiggle, but it was there. It was real. The room filled with quiet joy, the kind that needed no words. Emily held him close, feeling his heart beating now, slow but steady. The long night was over. Outside, the birds had returned to the orchard. Light poured in through the window. The world had moved on. But something had changed forever. The days that followed passed slowly, yet each one brought small victories. Lucky, once just a fragile breath on Emily's lap, now stood on wobbly legs. His movements were uncertain, his steps clumsy, but he was up. And that was everything. Emily spent every afternoon beside him, guiding him through the garden paths, coaxing him gently forward. He followed her like a shadow, stumbling sometimes, but never giving up. Each time he fell, she was there to lift him, and each time he stood again, their bond grew stronger. Her grandparents watched from the porch, quiet smiles playing on their faces. They had seen many animals come through their farm, but none had arrived the way Lucky had, on the edge of silence, pulled back by a child's determination and a whisper of life. "He's different," her grandmother said one evening. "It's like he knows." Emily didn't reply. She only smiled and looked down at the puppy sleeping at her feet, curled up in a sunbeam on the wooden floor. She remembered every detail of that day, the field, the cold fur, the terrible stillness. And then the sound. That cry. The moment life had returned. It had changed her in ways she couldn't fully explain. She had never known what it meant to fight for something so small, so helpless. And yet she had. And he had fought back. One morning, about a week after that long night, Lucky barked, really barked for the first time. It wasn't loud or fierce. It was high-pitched and playful, like laughter in the form of sound. Emily laughed too, chasing him through the orchard as the puppy darted between the trees, his energy returning like a tide. She had saved him, but in some quiet, invisible way, he had saved something in her too. Summer passed. The bond between them deepened. Lucky was no longer the still, lifeless figure she had once held in a panic. He was her companion now, curious, stubborn, and full of joy. And Emily, once a quiet girl who rarely spoke above a whisper, had found her voice in the most unexpected place, in saving a life. Sometimes in the stillness of the evening, she would hold him close and listen to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, a rhythm she would never forget. And always, she would whisper the words she had spoken that day, now a quiet promise between them both. You stayed, so I will too.